Is there anything left?" Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut to the five-star restaurant like a thunderclap. Heads turned. Forks paused midair. Conversations died instantly, the way sound fades before a coming storm. What stood before them wasn't just a pregnant beggar in tattered clothes. It was a challenge to everything they thought they understood about class, worth, and human dignity. How disgusting. How do they let people like that in here? Victoria Ashford's voice sliced through the ambient music with vicious elegance. Her manicured hand clutched a champagne flute as her eyes narrowed on the young woman standing at the edge of the main table. Kesha Williams stood tall despite her soaked clothes clinging to her 8-month belly, her arms wrapped protectively around it. Her lips didn't tremble, though the weight of 100 disapproving stares scorched her skin. She wasn't just cold. She was hungry, but far worse, she was being judged. "Excuse me, sir," Kesha said, her eyes locking on the man in the charcoal suit who was meticulously slicing into a $200 Wagyu steak. "Is there anything you're not going to finish?" The question exploded into the room like a drop bomb. A ripple of gasps, then silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. The man she addressed was David Chun, CEO of one of the nation's top construction empires. He was feared in boardrooms for his ruthless precision and admired for building a billion-dollar legacy from the ground up. But in that moment, he paused mid-cut, his fork suspended in the air. He didn't see a beggar. He saw a woman with sharp eyes, unwavering posture, and a calm that didn't belong to the desperate. "How long has it been since you last ate?" he asked, ignoring the murmur rising around them. 3 days, sir." There was no dramatics, no tears, just quiet truth, and somehow that hit harder than any sob story ever could. David placed his silverware on the linen tablecloth and gestured to the waiter. "Bring her another plate, the same as mine." The murmurs turned to outrage. Victoria leaned forward, hissing, "David, you can't be serious. This is a circus. What are you doing?" The restaurant manager scurried over, a tight smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Chun, perhaps the lady could eat in the kitchen? Some of the patrons are uncomfortable." David didn't look away from Kesha. He'd built skyscrapers and bulldozed corporate enemies. But now he was looking at a woman who refused to break. "Sit down," he said, pulling out a chair beside him. "Right here." Kesha didn't move at first. She wasn't scared. David could tell. She was calculating. And that, more than anything, fascinated him. What kind of pregnant woman hesitates before accepting food? He wondered. "Are you sure, sir?" "I'm dirty. I'm soaked." "You look perfect," he said without blinking. "What's your name?" "Kesha Williams." As the second plate was served, reluctantly, the tension in the room thickened. Victoria let out a sharp laugh. "This is ridiculous. You're rewarding this. You'll have a line of beggars at the door tomorrow." David turned toward her, his gaze frosty. "Beggars? She's a pregnant woman. She asked for food politely. If that offends you, maybe it's your values are disgusting." Kesha began to eat, slowly with grace. Every bite was deliberate, as if each morsel was sacred. Her posture, her poise. There was no trace of desperation in her movements, just dignity, unshaken. In fact, she seemed to know exactly how to behave in a room like this. She didn't look out of place. She looked like someone who had once belonged here, and somehow been pushed out. "Where did you learn to eat like this?" David asked, curiosity overtaking his initial pity. "My grandmother. She taught me dignity costs nothing and can't be bought." That line hit David harder than he expected. A silence fell over the table again, not from shock this time, but something else. Recognition, guilt, awe. Victoria, on the other hand, wasn't done. Oh, please, what a touching tale. Next chapter, she was a doctor before fate kicked her into the gutter. Kesha didn't blink. She put her fork down and looked straight at Victoria. "Not a doctor. Biomedical engineer. MIT class of 2019. Specialized in affordable cardiac devices." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria coughed into her champagne, her confidence suddenly brittle. "MIT," she muttered, eyes darting toward David. He leaned in. "Where'd you work?" Advanced Med Systems. 3 years designing tech for underserved communities. I was developing a new pacemaker, 80% cheaper than conventional ones, when I got pregnant. She gently rubbed her belly, her eyes not leaving David's. And then they let you go, he said, connecting the dots. Officially, budget cuts. Unofficially, the VP, Blake Morrison, made it clear that a black single mother didn't align with the image they want to present to their conservative backers. Victoria scoffed. As if a reputable company would make decisions like that. Do you really expect us to believe that fantasy? But this time, Kesha's stare was different. There was no more guarded politeness. There was quiet steel in her voice. I don't need you to believe me. But the legal documents I filed last week with the Equal Employment Commission might help. I wasn't going to fight them. But then I realized, she looked around the room, her gaze sweeping across the expensive jewelry, the disdainful faces, and the perfectly plated privilege. If I don't stand up, no one will. David was speechless. He had dined with presidents and closed deals with tech giants. But tonight, a hungry pregnant woman had taught him more about integrity than any boardroom ever had. And he had no idea that this meeting, this chance encounter, was just the beginning. Because behind Kesha's calm exterior were secrets that would soon ripple through the corridors of power. She wasn't just a woman down on her luck. She was a spark, and everything around her was dry kindling. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because what Kesha reveals next will not only shatter the myths of success, it'll redefine what real strength looks like in the face of cruelty, greed, and prejudice. And David Chun? He was about to learn that true wealth had nothing to do with what's in your wallet, and everything to do with who you're willing to stand beside when the world turns its back. A cold precision entered Kesha's voice, calculated and razor-sharp, causing Victoria Ashford to instinctively flinch, as if she just realized she'd stepped into a match far above her league. Ms. Ashford, Kesha said calmly, each syllable laced with quiet authority, may I ask what your academic background is? The question landed like a splash of ice water, and Victoria visibly tensed. That's irrelevant, she snapped, her words brittle. I studied scientific methodology before I specialized in bioengineering, Kesha replied, unbothered. And I learned that when someone dismisses evidence without even examining it, it's usually because they're afraid of what it might reveal. David watched with growing admiration as Kesha dismantled Victoria. Not with insults, not with theatrics, but with unflinching logic and grace. She hadn't raised her voice once, yet every word stung more than the last. She was defending herself with intellect, not indignation, and it stunned the room more than any outburst could have. Backslash. Blake Morrison, David muttered, his eyes narrowing in thought. I know that name. His company has several federal contracts, high-profile ones. Exactly, Kesha said. And Morrison's connections run deep enough to ensure I was quietly placed on an industry-wide blacklist. No company will officially say it. They all have polite explanations, restructuring budget limits, temporary hiring freezes. But the truth is, once Morrison pulled the strings, no one would touch me. David raised an eyebrow. So that's why you... She nodded. That's why I spent every last cent I had on legal fees, trying to sue Advanced Med Systems. I lost the case. I lost my apartment. I lost everything. She paused, her hand resting gently on a small, waterproof bag sitting by her chair. But I never lost this. Before David could ask, Victoria stood abruptly, her champagne glass tipping and crashing to the marble floor. David, you can't seriously be believing this elaborate sob story. It's clearly fabricated. She probably Googled a few tech terms and spun this tale to play on your sympathies. Her voice was sharp with panic now, not conviction. Just look at her. Do you honestly think someone like her went to MIT? The words echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Every fork froze midair. Conversations died. Even the waitstaff stood immobilized. No one could pretend anymore. The underlying prejudice that had been simmering beneath polite society's surface had just erupted, bare and ugly. David rose from his seat slowly, his expression unreadable but cold as stone. His voice, when it came, had none of the warmth or charm Victoria was used to. Victoria, He said, "Finish that sentence." She hesitated. Only for a second, but the old arrogance returned like a reflex. "David, you know exactly what I meant. People like her don't go to places like MIT. It's not personal, it's realism." "Realism," David repeated, tasting the word like it was poison. "I understand your version of realism perfectly." Kesha, meanwhile, sat composed, her gaze steady. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't even hurt. If anything, she seemed to have expected this moment, like a scientist watching an inevitable reaction unfold. "Mr. Chun," she said quietly, "thank you for the meal and your kindness. But you don't need to defend my honor. I'm used to hearing views like that." "You shouldn't be," David replied, turning back to her with renewed intensity. "And I won't stop defending you." Kesha studied his face for a moment. "Why?" The question disarmed him. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "Why do you care?" she asked. "You don't know me. I'm just a pregnant woman who asked for leftovers. Why do you care what happens to me?" David looked down, collecting his thoughts. "Because I recognize injustice when I see it," he said slowly. Then, after a pause, "and because I've been underestimated before, too, because of my background." She tilted her head, inviting the story. "My parents were Chinese immigrants," David continued. "They ran a laundry, worked 16-hour days to put me through college. When I started in construction, people said I didn't look the part, called me fat, mocked my accent, said I'd never succeed in the American market." Kesha gave him a soft, understanding nod. "And now," David said, gesturing vaguely around the elegant room, "my company builds half the skyscrapers in this city. But the only reason I got here was because someone believed in me when no one else would." There was a moment of quiet connection between them, a bridge built not of pity, but of shared experience. "What if I told you," Kesha said gently, "that I can prove everything I've said?" David leaned forward, intrigued. "How?" Kesha reached down and carefully opened the waterproof bag beside her. From it, she pulled out a tightly sealed tablet wrapped in protective casing. "This contains 3 years of original research, work that could redefine cardiac medicine for underserved populations. It also contains indisputable evidence of systematic discrimination by one of the largest medical tech corporations in America." Victoria let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "Oh, how convenient. A magic tablet with no witnesses. No way to verify a word of it." Kesha didn't even look at her. She powered the tablet on and rotated the screen toward David. The glow lit up his face as he studied what she showed him. Complex schematics, working prototypes, code databases, signed correspondences with Ivy League institutions, emails, memos, internal communications, names. David's breath caught. "My God, this is real." "Every line," Kesha confirmed. "Every file is authenticated. Every message backed by metadata. This is what I protected, even when I had to sleep on bus benches, even when I was 8 months pregnant and starving." She turned the screen off. "The real question is, what do you do when you have something that could save thousands of lives and expose a major injustice, but the world says you're not even worthy of being heard?" David stared at her in silence. He saw her now, not as a victim, not as a case study of misfortune, but as a brilliant, powerful woman with fire in her soul and evidence in her hands. A woman the world had tried to discard, but the world had failed. Victoria, still shaking her head, was too blinded by her own disdain to realize that she had just been seated across from one of the most brilliant scientific minds David Chun had ever encountered. And this was just the beginning. At that moment, Kesha's phone vibrated. She glanced down, expecting nothing important, but what she saw sent a chill straight through her spine. The message came from an unknown number. "Heard you're making some new friends. Be careful not to get in over your head. Some doors, when closed, are meant to stay that way. BM." She held the screen up for David to see. His expression darkened instantly, jaw tightening. "Blake Morrison," he muttered with a growing storm in his voice. "How the hell does he know where you are?" Kesha's eyes flicked toward Victoria. who was tapping furiously on her phone, her polished fingers dancing with agitation. Kesha didn't have to say it aloud. The implication was clear. Connections, she said simply. People like Morrison have ears and eyes in every place that matters. David pulled out his own phone and began typing with decisive purpose. I'm sending a message to Marcus Webb, my personal lawyer. He's one of the best in the country, and he specializes in corporate discrimination cases. Mr. Chun, Kesha said gently but firmly, I can't accept charity. It's not charity, David replied, meeting her eyes. It's an investment. Injustice. That was the moment Victoria exploded. Injustice, she snapped. David, you've lost your mind. This woman walks in off the street with some sob story, and you're just going to hand her lawyers power and access? And you're... Victoria, David interrupted, his voice like a hammer hitting granite. The entire restaurant fell silent. You can leave now. For a long second, Victoria just stared at him, stunned. David, I said leave. With a flush of rage and humiliation coloring her face, Victoria gathered her things in rigid, angry movements. Her pride had been wounded, but her arrogance hadn't. You'll regret this, she hissed. When you find out who she really is, you'll remember my words. People like her always reveal their true nature in the end. She stormed out, heels clacking, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. David turned back to Kesha, unbothered by the dramatic exit. Ignore her. Now, tell me more about Morrison, about what he really did. For the first time, something flickered in Kesha's eyes, not fear, but a painful determination sharpened by experience. Mr. Chun, she began, her voice low and steady, Morrison didn't just fire me. He systematically destroyed the careers of every qualified black employee who posed a threat to the white hierarchy he built at that company. I've documented 12 cases over the past 5 years. Brilliant engineers, PhD scientists, and groundbreaking researchers, all silent, sabotaged, or eliminated the moment their success began to challenge the myth that leadership has a color. David felt something heavy rise in his chest, a mix of fury and shame. And you documented all this? Kesha's answer was a chilling smile, not a smile of triumph, not even one of gratitude. It was a smile of someone who had endured war and was now prepared to fight on her own terms. For 3 years, she said, I didn't just develop medical technology. I quietly collected evidence, recordings, emails, tampered reports, denied promotions, discriminatory salaries. David's voice dropped. Why? Because my grandmother taught me intelligence without justice is incomplete, Kesha replied. And because I saw the same pattern that destroyed other brilliant lives before mine. I refused to be another name that disappeared quietly. And in that moment, David Chun realized he wasn't sitting across from a victim begging for help. He was staring into the eyes of a strategist, a woman who had taken every blow thrown at her and turned it into ammunition. Morrison hadn't broken her. He had helped forge her. 20 minutes later, the doors of the restaurant opened again, and Marcus Webb entered. A 42-year-old Harvard-educated lawyer, known for decimating corporate discrimination cases. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Kesha. Something passed through his expression. Recognition. Admiration. You're Kesha Williams, he said. Kesha's body tensed. Do we know each other? I know your work, Marcus replied, sitting down. I read your articles on cardiac bioengineering when I was building a case 2 years ago. Your insights on low-cost medical devices were revolutionary. David turned to him. Marcus, can you help her? I can do better, Marcus said calmly, opening his briefcase. I can make sure Blake Morrison never hurts anyone again. Kesha's expression hardened. You really think that's possible? If the evidence is what I think it is, Marcus said, we're not just filing a lawsuit. We're initiating a federal investigation. A federal investigation? Kesha asked, the weight of it hitting her. Companies like Advanced Med get over $300 million in federal contracts every year. If we prove systematic racial discrimination, they lose those contracts, pay billion-dollar penalties, and watch their stock crash. Kesha's eyes narrowed, sharp and fierce. Billions. And that's just the beginning, Marcus said. We could create a legal precedent that forces every tech company in this country to reevaluate their practices. How much evidence do you have exactly? He asked. Kesha placed her tablet on the table. 3 years of meticulous documentation, 12 separate cases, recordings of Blake Morrison himself talking about appropriate standards, emails where he orders HR to fabricate justifications to fire black employees, alter performance reviews, stolen patents, suppress breakthroughs, every move cataloged. David stared at the screen. My God! There's more, Kesha said. He redirected credit for major scientific discoveries from black researchers to white colleagues, less qualified, less experienced, just to maintain appearances. Marcus was scribbling rapidly into a notepad. That's enough to destroy the company from the inside out. With the right team, I can have a case ready in 3 months. 6 to resolve. Suddenly, Kesha's phone vibrated again. Another message. This time, even colder. I see you found some influential friends. Too bad it won't help. People like you always reveal their true nature. I suggest you disappear quietly before things get unpleasant. BM. David read the message over her shoulder. His face darkened. He's escalating. Threats. Marcus picked up his own phone and typed, I'll handle this. Mr. Morrison, he wrote, this is Marcus Webb, attorney for Ms. Kesha Williams. Any future communication should go through my office. Consider this your official warning regarding witness intimidation. The response was nearly immediate. Marcus Webb, the little lawyer, who thinks he can play with the big boys. Good luck proving the fantasies of a pregnant beggar. Some battles are too big for small people. Marcus smiled coldly. He just made a very serious mistake. Threatening a pregnant woman, in writing, with racial undertones. Kesha looked between the two men. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Morrison has power. He could ruin both of you. David and Marcus exchanged glances, united in resolve. Kesha, David said, men like Morrison thrive because good people get scared. But not this time. I have a confession, Marcus added. It's no coincidence I'm here tonight. I've been monitoring advanced med for 2 years, just waiting for someone with real evidence to step forward. What do you mean? My daughter, Jasmine, is a brilliant chemical engineer. She applied to advanced med, was passed over for a white candidate with inferior credentials. That injustice lit the fire. And when David told me about an MIT-trained engineer with data on advanced med, I knew it had to be you. So you sought me out, Kesha said quietly. We seek justice, David corrected. And you're holding the keys to every door Morrison thought he had locked forever. Kesha took a deep breath. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't fighting alone. My baby is due in a month. Perfect, Marcus said with a quiet grin. Because when Morrison is called to testify in federal court, you'll be holding his son. The image would destroy him. David leaned forward, a new light in his eyes. That pacemaker design you created, does it really work? Perfectly, Kesha replied. It cuts costs by 80%. It could save thousands of lives in low-income communities. David picked up his phone. Then let's do more than destroy Morrison. Let's show the world what he tried to bury. I have contacts at Stanford, at Johns Hopkins. They'll want your work. They'll fund your work. Kesha's eyes shimmered, not from tears, but from awe. Why are you doing this for me? She asked, voice trembling slightly. Because, Marcus said, sometimes justice needs a little help. And because silence is exactly what men like Morrison count on, David added, besides, I have a feeling helping you is going to be the best investment I ever make. While the three strategized at that table, Blake Morrison sat comfortably in his office, smug and confident that another would-be whistleblower had been scared into silence. He had no idea the pregnant woman he tried to crush was about to engineer the collapse of everything he built. And he certainly didn't know that every insult, every threat, every act of cruelty would become the weapon used to bury him. For good. 6 weeks later, the Stanford University auditorium was standing room only. The nation's top minds had gathered for the annual conference on innovation in affordable medical technology. Blake Morrison front row, had been invited as a leading industry expert. He sipped his coffee smugly until the moderator took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Dr. Kesha Williams, biomedical engineer, MIT graduate, and visionary behind the revolutionary low-cost cardiac device project. Blake froze, coffee halfway to his lips. "That's impossible," he muttered. "She's living on the street." Kesha walked on stage with grace and confidence, dressed in white, head held high, and in her arms her newborn daughter asleep. The room erupted into applause. And Morrison realized, far too late, that the woman he'd tried to erase had just rewritten the future. The image was unforgettable. A black mother, her newborn daughter cradled in one arm, standing confidently on stage before an audience of over 500 researchers, doctors, and global investors. Behind her, a glowing screen promised a revolution in cardiac technology. Her presence alone challenged decades of bias. A woman once dismissed as a beggar, now commanding the room with the force of scientist and survivor. A hush fell over the auditorium, not out of obligation, but respect. For months ago, Kesha began, her voice ringing clear and proud, I was asking for leftovers at a restaurant. Not because I was incapable, but because a corrupt system decided that my skin color and status as a single mother made me incompatible with scientific excellence. In the front row, Blake Morrison's confident posture faltered. His shoulders tensed. His hand twitched toward his phone. His eyes flicked to the exits. Today, Kesha continued, I'm not just presenting a technology that can reduce the cost of pacemakers by 80%. I'm presenting evidence of how that same innovation was buried, sabotaged by systemic racial discrimination. The screen behind her lit up Discrimination at Advancement Systems, a case study. Morrison rose slightly from his chair, trying to slip out unnoticed, but Marcus Webb stepped into the aisle, arms folded, expression cold, blocking his path with silent, pointed precision. In 2020, Kesha pressed on, never raising her voice but commanding every inch of the room. Vice President Blake Morrison told me, and I quote, "Women like you don't fit the image we want to project to serious investors. Perhaps you should consider more suitable areas." A wave of shocked murmurs rolled through the auditorium. Morrison's collar was soaked in sweat, his lips pressed into a thin, white line. "Fortunately," Kesha added, lifting the remote, "I recorded that conversation." Morrison's unmistakable voice poured from the speakers. "Kesha, let's be realistic. You're smart, but our investors are conservative. A black single mother leading our flagship project will be problematic. You understand?" Gasps erupted. Some audience members sat forward in disbelief. Others simply shook their heads, stunned. Morrison looked around, trapped in a circle of judgment he could no longer evade. "But that wasn't the only conversation," Kesha said, advancing to the next slide. Another recording began, this time between Morrison and the HR director. "We need to get rid of Williams. And that researcher Johnson, too. Too much diversity is affecting team dynamics. Find technical reasons. Be creative." The outrage was palpable now. Fingers pointed. Whispers turned into open disgust. Morrison sank deeper into his chair, shrinking. "For 3 years," Kesha said, calm as ever, "I documented 12 cases of racial discrimination at AdvanceMed. Engineers fired. Researchers sabotaged. Discoveries stolen and credited to less qualified white colleagues. The screen filled with names and detailed case files. Morrison recognized everyone. They were the careers he had crushed to maintain what he called appropriate standards. Dr. Marcus Johnson, Kesha continued, a Harvard-educated cardiologist, was fired after developing a revolutionary surgical technique. Officially, they cited cultural incompatibility. In reality, another recording played. Morrison again, "Johnson is getting too much recognition. Doctors are specifically asking to work with him. This can't go on." Morrison made a final attempt to flee, but David Chun appeared beside him. Cell phone raised, recording. "Leaving early, Blake?" he asked, loud enough for the cameras to catch. Kesha didn't stop. 15 minutes ago, she announced, federal agents entered AdvanceMed's headquarters with search and seizure warrants. The company is now under investigation for systemic discrimination, federal contract violations, and scientific fraud. Morrison turned ghostly white. His phone buzzed wildly. Investors, lawyers, and board members all in crisis. His empire was unraveling. "But what makes me most proud," Kesha said, her daughter now asleep against her shoulder, "is that the research they try to bury will begin implementation in public hospitals next month." David stepped on stage beside her. "My company is funding full-scale production of these devices. We estimate we'll save 500,000 lives each year, especially in underserved communities." The room erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet. Investors wept. Journalists snapped photos. And Morrison, once the embodiment of corporate dominance, sat alone, untouchable no more. Marcus Webb walked to him with a stack of legal papers. "Blake Morrison, you are being federally prosecuted for racial discrimination, witness intimidation, and violation of the Civil Rights Act. Your assets are frozen. Any future movement of funds or evidence will be treated as obstruction. This is persecution." Morrison sputtered. "I'm the victim of a conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Kesha repeated into the microphone, turning toward him. "No, Mr. Morrison. Conspiracy is when 12 brilliant lives are systematically destroyed because their skin doesn't fit your version of appropriate. This is justice." Morrison clutched at his chest, panic swelling. "You don't know who you're messing with. I have powerful connections." David laughed. "You had powerful connections. They cut ties 2 hours ago when the DOJ went public. Your board is voting on your removal as we speak." Morrison's phone rang. His assistant. "Sir, the board has voted. You've been fired for cause. No severance. Your accounts are frozen. Security is clearing your office." Morrison collapsed into a chair, dazed. In less than a day, he had lost his job, his reputation, his wealth, and his freedom, all because he underestimated a pregnant woman who refused to remain silent. Kesha turned to the audience. "I dedicate this research to every brilliant mind silenced by prejudice. Today, we prove that true excellence will always rise, no matter who tries to suppress it." The ovation was deafening. Federal agents escorted Morrison out the back, while the woman he once mocked received handshakes, partnership offers, and standing ovations from the country's finest institutions. As the applause continued, only one question echoed in the hearts of the crowd. How many more Kesha Williamses were still out there, waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard? 2 years later, Dr. Kesha Williams sat in her sleek Palo Alto office inside the Stanford Medical Innovation Center. On her desk sat a contract expanding her pacemaker distribution to 40 countries. Her company, valued at $50 million, had already saved 200,000 lives. Across the room, little Sophia, now 2, giggled as she colored with toy syringes and stethoscopes. "Dr. Williams," said who representative across the table, "your impact is measurable and extraordinary." Across town, Blake Morrison walked out of yet another failed job interview, adjusting his cheap tie in defeat. No one would hire him. His name was poison. The once glowing articles about his leadership had long been replaced with headlines about lawsuits, fraud, and scandal. His wife had divorced him. His children refused to speak to him. Advanced Med had paid out $800 million in settlements and closed its doors. That same afternoon, Kesha received a call. "Dr. Williams," said a young voice, "this is Jessica, the engineering student from MIT. Because of your story, I got a full scholarship. I'm designing clean water systems for tribal clinics in Arizona." Calls like that came in daily. Her story hadn't just changed one life. It had ignited a generation. Victoria Ashford, too, had paid a price. After her discriminatory remarks went viral, she was expelled from all social councils. Even her family publicly disavowed her. She now lived in social exile, a cautionary tale of what happens when privilege turns toxic. Marcus Webb took the momentum from the case to launch the National Center for Combating Corporate Discrimination. It forced policy reforms at hundreds of companies and helped shut down 17 with similar practices. His daughter Jasmine, once rejected, now led her own biotech firm. That night, after tucking Sophia into bed, Kesha sat by the window of her quiet Palo Alto home. The city shimmered outside, a far cry from the rain-soaked shelters she once called home. On her desk sat new research, an AI system to detect bias in hiring algorithms. But her greatest triumph wasn't wealth or revenge. It was something deeper. She had proven that intelligence knows no class, no color, and that the most powerful revolutions begin with those who've been pushed to the edge. Blake Morrison tried to silence her out of fear. Victoria tried to shame her out of prejudice. Both failed, because they couldn't see that brilliance doesn't come in a box, and excellence, when suppressed, only grows sharper. 2 years ago, Kesha was a pregnant woman begging for scraps. Now, she fed hope to millions. Her message echoed across the globe. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Build something so extraordinary. Those who once doubted you will spend the rest of their lives regretting not standing by your side. And for everyone who watched her rise from hunger to history, the lesson was clear. No matter how many doors close, there's always a window for those brave enough to find it.